that's a very satisfying ending to a very popular song, "Let It Be" by the Beatles, 1970. So what, about 50 years old, I guess. Um, but and that's because we were expecting it to end that way. And very often there is an expectation in music for a thing to go a certain way. Not that because it needs to be predictable, but there are certain times when, if our expectations are not met, we're going to be disappointed. It's going to seem like dissonance to us, and dissonance meaning um, uh, not pleasing sound, because sonance or sonority have to do with sound, and dissonance is basically not good sound. And so that's kind of where they get the expression cognitive dissonance from, because what goes on in our head is that there's a battle between old and new information, essentially, or old feelings and new information, because our unconscious mind is where we store we store memories and information, and that's also where some repressed feelings live. And even though we've got new information, we as ex-witnesses or people that used to be part of a high control group and that are no longer in that group, there are a lot of things that we learned that are still in our head that you can't just delete, but so we don't believe them anymore because we've got new information. But every time new information comes in, our brain still compares the new information with the old stored stuff. And sometimes that results in a battle where the unconscious mind kind of wins. We don't know that's happening, but the unconscious mind wins the battle because it has to be resolved one way or the other. So there might be feelings in there, and we talked about this in the last video when we talked about cognitive dissonance, and we talked about notes that clash like that. And how do we get rid of that? Well, we just go like that. We just add some more notes basically, and all of a sudden it sounds beautiful. So that's about adding knowledge, not being afraid of knowledge like we were taught to be afraid of if it wasn't from the watchtower or for the head of our group. So the negative thoughts that might still be in there related to our conditioning. It's not just the things that we were taught, but the conditioning that results from being taught and treated the way we were. For example, the fact that individuals were de-emphasized because it was all about the organization. It was all about the bigger picture. It was about the congregation and its reputation. And when was the last time you actually saw somebody, like an elder, actually solve somebody's or help somebody solve a problem? It's really not about the individual. So that demolished our self-esteem, plus the fact that we were good for nothing slaves. Whatever we did wasn't good enough. If you put in 15 hours last month, you should put in 20 hours this month. And, slaving away, being a regular pioneer, and so that demolished our self-esteem, and that might still be there, even though the information we realized was incorrect, and we shouldn't have been treated that way. And there's plenty of new information telling us that it could be still a part of us. So how could that affect expectations? So let's say we decide that we want to start a new business, and we've never done that before. Maybe we were regular pioneers back in the day and we had a cleaning business, which was a fine thing to do, by the way. It's nothing wrong with it. Somebody has to do it, and it's a job. And having your own business is having your own business. It's entrepreneurial. It's a risk. So anybody that did that, I commend them. But it was really on the back burner. It was like no more than 20 hours a week, whatever, because the real thing is regular pioneering, and you don't want to make too much money because that's being too materialistic. So it was always negative, negative, negative. You can't, you shouldn't. And now we want to start a business, and that comes into our mind. We're like, oh my God, this is probably too much for me to bite off and chew. And so really, are we creating expectations that are not even necessarily going to happen? How do you know you're going to fail? Is there a guarantee you're going to fail? If you've planned it out and you're smart enough, you know how to do this stuff. Maybe you've gone to college finally. You've conferred with some friends and family and things like this, and you got a pretty good plan. You got a business that there's a need for your product or your service. So you really think you're going to fail? Like what? How do we know that? And it could be with anything. We decide that we want to start a family or go to college or become a singer or an actor or a comedian or something like that. Well, we might fail. Yeah, sure. I mean, you look at like Michael Jordan or Albert Einstein or Thomas Edison. They were all failures. Every baseball player is a failure because the best baseball players only hit the ball effectively 3 out of 10 times. So 7 out of 10 times they fail, and those are the great players. And so every once in a while we're going to fail. There's no question about it. Not every once in a while, not all the time. So why predict that we're going to fail? Is it just because of um, that expectation that was put in our mind way back when? Why not replace that with the expectation that we are going to succeed, and be positive about that, and know that you are going to succeed? And then if it doesn't work, then we'll just say, well, all right, this is probably what I could have done differently. Let me do it differently the next time. So expectation. When we get to the other side of that expectation, we're going to be really, really satisfied that we didn't listen to our unconscious mind, but we educated ourselves and got rid of those negative feelings that were kind of telling us that we're doomed to be a failure. So this was part two of cognitive dissonance and how we can actually embrace it, because that is, in fact, the way our minds work. It's not a bad thing. Knowledge is not a bad thing. Whether it's true or false, we make the decision. It's never bad to learn things. So that's part two. Next part, I'm going to talk about how, in my particular case, how music and artistic pursuit um, got me through the exit from the organization. It really helped me to um, continue to educate myself and not be afraid of learning new things. And it might be different for you. It might be some other creative pursuit or something else. But stay tuned, and thanks for listening.